The 2021 Formula 1 season has arrived, and this year, for the first time ever, the FIA has introduced a budget cap. Teams will be restricted in how much money they can spend on car development throughout the 2021 season. It's been a long time coming, with murmurings of such rules being suggested for over a decade, but it has now arrived in the form of a $145 million cap, which then subsequently reduces over the next few seasons. But what does this all mean for the Formula 1 teams? And who are the winners and the losers? Let's have a look. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. To work out the winners and the losers from the budget cap, I will first take a look at the new rules in place, and see what the stipulations are regarding the spending. I'll then have a look at the teams themselves, and evaluate which have benefited the most from the spend caps, and which teams have lost out. I'll then share my opinion on what this means for the 2021 season and the future of Formula 1. And as always, make sure to hit that like button if you enjoy this video and subscribe for more F1 content just like this in the future. The 2021 budget cap rules. The 2021 budget cap, on the face of it, sounds simple. The teams can spend up to $145 million on car development through the 2021 season. However, as with all rules in Formula 1, there are of course exceptions. For example, this figure doesn't include the salaries of the top 3 team members or the drivers. And the $145 million cap is actually technically $147.4 million for 2021, as the teams get an additional $1.2 million for each race over a 21 event season. Over the next couple of years, the rules are set to reduce by $5 million per year until 2023, where we see the cap sit at $135 million. And it must be said that whilst this is the first time that Formula 1 has introduced a financial cap on the sport, it certainly isn't the first time that the sport has tried to introduce a restriction, and this is where we find our first losers. Back in 2009, there was a dispute between the FIA and the F1 Teams Association over a proposed budget cap for the 2010 season. In response to the financial crash of 2008, the FIA proposed a budget cap of $30 million, but they decided to make it an optional measure. To reward those sticking to the budget cap, in return they would be given greater technical and design freedoms, so effectively setting up a Formula 1 championship with 2 separate rulebooks. The teams were understandably outraged to the extent that they even proposed breaking off from the championship to create a rival series. And of course, this didn't end up happening, but the losers from this come in the form of the 3 teams that joined the F1 championship in 2010, having been told by Bernie Ecclestone, then chief exec of Formula 1, that a budget cap was on its way. So the new teams of Lotus, Hispania and Virgin joined the sport under the impression that there would be a level playing field a few years down the line. But as we now know, they were never really competitive, and Hispania left the sport at the end of 2012, Caterham left in 2014, and then Mana Marussia were gone by the end of the 2016 season. So it didn't exactly work out for them. And that is why I would say they're the first losers of this new budget cap. They all came clearly a decade too early, and even if any of them wanted to return as a new entrant now, for starters, the budget cap is almost 5 times higher in 2021 than the proposed setup for 2010, and of course, as I mentioned in a previous video, there is a small matter of the $200 million new entrant fee. But now, let's get into the state of the current teams and look at who wins and who loses from the 2021 budget cap. The losers. So the initial first place to look for losers for the budget cap are of course the 3 teams of Mercedes, Red Bull and Ferrari, as they have the biggest budgets in Formula 1. Mercedes were estimated to have had a budget of around $484 million in 2019. Now of course this budget does include elements that would be removed from the cost cap. For example, their marketing budget, tax, and as mentioned earlier, the drivers and top 3 personnel's salaries. Media speculation suggests that the team spend roughly $130 million alone on the team's staff. And even after taking away the top 3 salaries from this, it still takes up a significant portion of the team's budget. And I think it's safe to say that the majority of the rest of the $484 million spend is on items that would fall under the cost cap. So the team need to shrink their expenditure significantly. Ferrari were estimated to have had a similar budget size of $463 million in 2019, and Red Bull had a similar budget again on $445 million. So the view here would be that all 3 of the normal front-running teams will need to shrink their workforce and refocus their budgets to maximise their points per million spent. We've already seen this, as the traditional top three have been moving personnel to other non-Formula 1 projects. Ferrari have been looking at alternative motorsport avenues. Mercedes have set up an aerodynamic performance specialist team called Applied Science, and this team works in collaboration with Ineos to offer aerodynamic consultancy, working on all sorts of different motorsport and non-motorsport projects. And of course, Red Bull have been involved in other projects in the past, including building the Valkyrie car alongside Aston Martin, and they'll undoubtedly be doing more projects like this in a similar fashion in the future. So it's safe to say that the top three teams have indeed all lost out from the budget cap, and the disruption caused by reducing the size of the teams compared to previous years will also be a factor. But there are ways in which the front-running teams could actually benefit from the cost cap, which I'll get onto later. Alpine and McLaren are the next potential losers, as their estimated budgets sit in the next bracket at $272 million and $269 million respectively. And already, McLaren have laid off 70 staff from their Formula 1 team, citing the budget cap and the pandemic in those decisions. Last year, the then Renault team also announced cuts for the wider organisation, but it isn't clear how many of these redundancies have hit the F1 side of the business. But it's safe to say that some people will be lost from the team to meet the budget cap. So these two teams have indeed taken a hit, but the impact on them isn't even close to the extent of the changes to the top three. But really, whilst the top teams have had to make cuts, they are all in positions to ensure that they meet the budget cap this year and will probably be hitting the maximum spend for 2021. The winners. Moving on to the winners of the budget cap now, and I have to say that in my opinion, there are a lot more winners than losers from this new regulation. And the first winner that I'm going to look at is us, the fans of Formula 1. And the reason for this is that whilst in 2021 we might not see too much of a change to the order overall, throughout this season the teams are having to find a way to balance their spending on the 2021 car and the 2022 car under the new regulations. Haas have already come out and declared that the car that takes to the grid in the first race in Bahrain will not be developed through 2021, as they instead spent all of their development budget on the new regulations. And given they're willing to declare that publicly, how many of the other teams will be shifting most, if not all, of their budget to next year? It certainly seems like a story that will unfold this season, and this is exactly why it's a win for the fans. Not only will we see different speeds of development throughout the 2021 season, we'll also see the teams that develop less through this year potentially having better cars for 2022, which expenditure-wise will probably be the most balanced that we've seen Formula 1 for many, many years. And in addition, by bringing the budget cap in now, a year before the 2022 regulations, it means the teams haven't had an opportunity to spend extra money in the season before the new regulations are put in place. So this budget cap is doing its job from a performance perspective, but the smaller teams will also see the budget cap as a lifeline to stay in Formula 1. Looking at the likes of Williams, Haas, AlphaTauri and Alfa Romeo, these teams have a budget of around $150 million anyway. And so of course they're spending less than the budget cap on car performance. So it's reasonable to assume that these teams may not see a particular change in the way that they operate. And in fact, in an ideal world, some of the funds may in fact start to balance out in the future between the top teams and the backmarkers. So they could end up getting even closer in the future. And then you have Aston Martin. And under the guise of Force India and Racing Point, the Silverstone team has been one of, if not the best team, in terms of getting the maximum out of their car, given their modest budget. The team, back in 2016 and 2017, were spending just $110 million, according to team principal Otmar Safnauer. And the team ended up in fourth in the Constructors' Championship on both of those occasions. So this team has a pedigree of delivering the most points per dollar spent. A statistics that I'm sure they did even better in through 2020 is this team scored 195 points. This year though, not only do they have an evolution of a car that scored 4 podiums last year, including of course that race win in Sakir, they also have a huge amount of investment from Aston Martin. And the fact that they have so many sponsors that were either retained from last year or new to the team this season shows just how much the team really mean business, and their partners are of course backing them. Lawrence Stroll, the CEO of the team, has declared that they have ambitions to win the championship within the next 5 years. And given their track record of outperforming their budgets in the past, if they can retain their core values of maximising the investment that goes into the car, then they have every chance of doing that by 2026. The timing of the budget cap isn't perfect for Aston Martin in my opinion, as they would have probably wanted at least a year to be able to spend the additional funds to try and catch up to the frontrunners. But regardless, Aston Martin are the team that are set to benefit the most from the budget cap, in my opinion. But as I mentioned earlier, the new budget cap could also actually benefit the top teams. Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff has said that the Mercedes team have assessed each of their processes in order to find efficiencies and opportunities to adapt them and maximise their potential. Now this is where the top teams are of course set up for success. For example, Mercedes already evaluated ways to increase the lifespan of some parts to ensure they can minimise the cost of replacing them, and their processes are set up to ensure that they are able to identify their key development path from an early stage. Whilst the rule does somewhat level the playing field, the starting point of each team is drastically different. So who are the main winners from all this? Well, I'd say that Aston Martin are best placed to build on what they've already achieved in the past, and I think they will only improve going into the next few years with the additional investment. But also, let's face it, there's still going to be a divide in Formula 1. There are the haves and the have-nots. Hopefully the two groups will be closer together, and maybe there'll be an opportunity for some to bridge the gap. Of course, the ideal outcome would be for things to balance out between the teams, but I still feel like this sport is a long way away from being a balanced motorsport series. So that's my view of the winners and the losers from Formula 1's new $145 million budget cap. What's your thoughts on this? And what did I miss? Let me know in the comments, and if you've enjoyed this video and watched this far, then please do leave it a like and hit that subscribe button for more F1 content just like this in the future.